So for our next session, we have Tom Ring and Jane Fury. Tom Ring has a few different credits to his name with regards to I say credits in the sense of like, guys, he's an authentic geek. He knows all sorts of geeky things. If you get him talking, as you will in a moment, he will talk about all sorts of lovely things with regards to liturgy and Catholicism and whatnot. And Jane Fury is a writer. How many books are you a writer of?
I think there's 4 or 5.
4 or 5 books.
You
I should know these things, but I don't.
You're safe to big as some author.
And they are here to present on the Camino de Santiago and the Lord of the Rings. And so without further ado, Tom Ring and Jane Fury.
Thank you. So I would like to thank SK because she has done all of the heavy theological and philosophical lifting for us. And we're going to have a travel blog now. So let's make sure this works. Did this work? No. There it is. Okay. I apologize. This is our crutch. Also, a little word. My job here is to be the straight man and give you the information, and Jane's job is to make snarky comments. So let's start out with what is pilgrimage. Well, SK covered that in amazing detail. So I'd like to propose that, in a nutshell, pilgrimage is a journey inward as well as outward, and the modern pilgrim seeks to renew and strengthen their faith through travel. With me so far? So our working definition of pilgrimage, therefore, is a transformative journey to a sacred place. And it didn't. There we go. No, that was complicated. Okay, and that's what makes being a pilgrim different from being a tourist, right? So for a tourist, travel is an end to itself. For a pilgrim, travel is a means to an end. Pilgrims travel with a clear intention to draw closer to God through this journey that they're on. Pilgrimage is sacred travel. We expect to return to our homes transformed in some way, closer to the Lord, as part of our process of constant conversion, right? We will, if we do this properly, we will not return as the same person that we left. Let's move on. So probably the best explanation of this, and one that we're going to come back to, is from T.S. Eliot. We shall not cease from exploration, and at the end of our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. So the question is, not just Frodo, but all of the hobbits in the Lord of the Rings, are they on a pilgrimage by that definition? At first glance, not so much. While Mount Doom in Mordor might be, a holy site to some, it clearly isn't to the hobbits or the other peoples of the West. And yet, their voyage does share some remarkable similarities with the most common walking pilgrimage that we have these days, the Camino de Santiago. And if we keep in mind the idea of a transformative journey, and the words of T.S. Eliot, we can start to maybe tackle the question of whether pilgrimage is primarily about the destination or about the journey. So let us talk destinations. The destination of the Camino de Santiago is here. The cathedral, and more importantly, the crypt under the cathedral, which houses the relics of the Apostle St. James the Greater, who was, of course, tradition has it that he was in Spain, and he was a spectacularly bad evangelist. The stories say that he made 9 converts in the years that he was in Spain.
How long was he in Spain?
We don't know.
Yeah.
But a while. And ordained exactly 2 men to the priesthood. Was absolutely despondent about this. The Blessed Virgin appeared to him standing on a pillar and said, "No, you've done a great job. It's fine." I'm paraphrasing slightly here. And I'm probably out of camera range. I need to not do that. And she said, go back to Jerusalem. Your work here is done. So he goes back to Jerusalem, and as we can read in the book of Acts, immediately got his head snipped off. Awkward. But I would propose to you that in the centuries since that, James's influence in the lives of Christians and in the lives of non-Christians who become pilgrims on the route has been enormous. He converted 9 people while he was in Spain. He has probably converted millions since then. So this is where we go to visit. Now, and before you get any ideas, it's just a coincidence. No, not important. So, but this does lead us to the, and there is St. James. It does lead us to the destination of the fellowship, which is hardly a religious site. And Frodo and the others are not going there to get something. They're not going there to conform or transform their lives necessarily. They are going there to destroy something, to lose something in a sense, to rid themselves and the world of that power and corruption that is inherent in the ring, which is the very personification of corruption and power.
Not a lot of parallels.
Yeah, no, not a lot of parallels. Yeah, be patient. Okay, so maybe it's the journey rather than the destination. So we're going to take a look at that. As we mentioned earlier, you are still required to walk the Camino de Santiago, or ride a bicycle or a horse or a wheelchair or a cart, but physically convey yourself there in some way. And it can start anywhere, even from your front door. We, on our 2016 Camino, we met on our very first day, a kid from Cologne, Germany named Matthias, who started walking out his front door. And when we met him, he was crossing the Pyrenees. He'd already been walking for 6 weeks, I think.
We got our first stamp at the cathedral in Seattle, St. James Cathedral. They have stamps. You can put it into your little passport book and start from there.
Yep, exactly. And you don't have to walk thousands of miles either. In fact, the cathedral office in Santiago de Compostela issues a certificate called Compostela on the completion of your pilgrimage, and they only require that you walk the last 100 kilometers, which is about 60 miles. So let us, we're not going to start in Germany, so let us zoom in. A little blurry, we're getting there. We're going to concentrate on just one of the routes. As you can see, there are zillions of them. The most famous and well-traveled is called the Camino Frances, because it enters Spain from France. And I can't quite get it, but you can see where all those routes converge basically into one and then go along the north to Santiago, which is in the corner there.
Not tall enough.
Oh, yeah, oh, look at that. Yeah, me neither. Okay. Anyway, so you'll notice that most of the European routes merge as they come into Spain, and that single route that goes along the north is the Camino Frances. Different map. On this map, you can see the yellow arrow with the town of Sarria. That is about 111 or so kilometers from Santiago, and that is where an awful lot of pilgrims start. The sort of, and you can start anywhere, as I've said, but these days, many people begin the Camino Frances either on the French side of the Pyrenees in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, or in Roncesvalles, which is the monastery on the Spanish side of the Pyrenees. That's about 500 miles, 800 kilometers or so. And if you walk the entire thing, it should take you 33 days, which is, of course, 1 day for every year that Christ walked upon the earth. And that assumes, of course, that you're keeping a steady pace and that you're not, you know,
Days off.
sleeping in Pamplona. So let us return to the fellowship now. This map, which may be a little hard to see, Depicts the journey of the hobbits from Shire to Rivendell, and then all of the members of the fellowship from there on as they split up. It's a little confusing. We're going to concentrate mostly on that red path, which is where the fellowship is together, and then that bright green path is Sam and Frodo go into Mordor. How does that compare to the Camino? Well, if we set the starting point to scale, and in Oxford, which is where the professor insisted the Shire would probably be, you can see it's long, but it doesn't really, it's a little tricky to see the comparison, so we're going to rotate the route slightly, and plus, you know, they walk on water a bit, which is awkward.
There we go.
There we go. Still a rough approximation, still walking on water for a little bit. But we can see if the hobbits were on Camino, like our friend Matthias, they would have started in Germany. In fact, one of the first things they would have seen would have been the Black Forest. So I guess that tracks, right? The hobbits walked a lot further than we ever have on Camino.
Even if you put all of our Caminos together.
Yeah, probably. It's about 1,700 miles. And they, of course, had to walk back. We took a plane.
A train.
Yeah, train and a plane and a bus at one point. But where the distance might be different, once we get into the sort of more manageable aspects of daily life and the phases of the journey, you're going to see that there are some odd parallels. So what is a typical day like on Camino? First, you wake up in your albergue, which is a pilgrim's hostel, essentially, and they are everywhere. The Spanish have been hosting this pilgrimage since the 9th century, and they've pretty much got it down to a science, right? Almost every village has three things. It has a church, across the street from the church is the bar, and then down the block is the albergue. So, and sometimes the bar and the albergue are the same building, which is a little dodgy. Also, occasionally the church and the albergue are the same building, which is less dodgy. No, not that we've seen, but
Depends on the church.
yeah, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. The one difference, of course, that you've already probably tweaked to is that we're staying in well-lit inns, right? Essentially during this whole trip, whereas the hobbits were camping. Camping is almost universally prohibited in Spain, except in very specific places. And I think you're halfway through the Camino before you find a campground. Now, that's not true in France. If you take one of the routes through France or through Germany, you can camp. And in fact, Matthias was doing that.
He was rough.
Yeah. He looked rough too, let me tell you. Oh my gosh. Anyway, but the one thing that we do have in common, of course, is we are carrying stuff. We are carrying our packs. So once you're up and packed, you start walking. You're probably leaving before anything in the village is open because Spain gets really hot in the afternoons and you want to get your walking done early. So you probably walk to the next village before you even have breakfast, which could be an hour or two, 4 or 10 kilometers. On the route, again, unlike the hobbits, the route is very well marked. In the 1970s, there was a priest, Don Sampras, I believe, Don Sampras Elias, who tried to revive the Camino, and he bought a bunch of paint to mark it. And it was yellow paint because Spain was just joining the EU, and the yellow that was used on the road signs was slightly different from the yellow that was used in Spain. So they had warehouses full of yellow paint.
Wrong yellow, which now we have as the Camino yellow.
Yes, so every 15 or 20 minutes as you're walking, you'll see an arrow, sometimes many of them. If you have walked more than 20 minutes without seeing an arrow, turn around, we're lost. Yeah, not a lot of arrows for the hobbits. Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself there. Anyway, at this point, you will come to a village and you will have breakfast, first breakfast. And it will consist of some sort of bread product or, what is this called? This is a
Tortilla español.
right. So this is the one thing that was really weird about Spain. Like none of the food words are the same as Mexican Spanish. So this is a tortilla. My other favorite one is tostada. Everybody knows what a tostada is, right? In Spain, it's toast. Sometimes with butter if you're lucky. So, and of course, I can't miss the pure bliss that is cafe con leche, which is the best coffee in the world, regardless of what anyone else thinks. I will die on this hill.
Not too.
Yeah, no. We're not entirely sure what the hobbits were having for breakfast, but this is not an atypical Camino breakfast, like random bits of fruit, random bits of bread, a mug of something hot. And then you walk some more. You might pass through a village or two, maybe even a town. The hobbits, by contrast, spend most of their time walking in open countryside. Once they get past Bree, of course. And then it's time for second breakfast. Second breakfast is a lot like first breakfast, only 4 kilometers further down the road. And of course, we
11sies.
yes, and the jokes here probably write themselves. So, and there are, as Francine said, 11s is like constantly on the Camino because you were burning so many calories. You were eating constantly after about the first week. I walked for a while with a lady who's a nutritionist from Switzerland, and we were eating dinner at one point, and she turned to me and said, you know, back of the envelope calculations, we're eating about 4,000 calories a day, and every one of us is losing weight. So anyway, depending on how hungry you are. Yeah,
Trust me.
that's fair. And then you walk some more.
Lots of walking.
And some more. And eventually you'll find a place for lunch, hopefully. And at that point, you're starting to figure out how the day is going, how far you want to walk that day, where you want to end up. And you do meet people from all over the world on Camino. The fellow on the right is from New Zealand. His name is Eamon, and I met him on my first day walking. And the guy next to him is Cliff, who is a retired firefighter from Boston, who had just had hip replacement surgery. And we were like, why are you walking on brand new hips? And his response was, they're still under warranty. Anyway, so you want to figure out where you're going to stay the night. Probably not Isengard. Not Isengard. And it's time to hit the trail again. And eventually, after more of that eating, walking, you find where you want to sleep in the night. And the fellow in that doorway, I later found out, spent most of his life in Indonesia, was actually a British expat. So when you arrive at your albergue, there's a process that happens. If you're really lucky, if it's a good albergue, when you walk in the door, they will hand you a glass of water. But Francine mentioned earlier, sorry, Jane.
It's okay.
Mentioned earlier, the pilgrim passport. So albergues are dirt cheap to sleep in. Some of them are just by donation. But the way they sort of moderate this is you're only allowed to sleep in them if you have a pilgrim's passport. And it's just, you can kind of see it there. It's just a folded up piece of paper, and every place you stay will stamp and date. And you can get those stamps at lunch. You can get those stamps at every church you visit. And it's just so they can take a quick look at it and say, oh yes, you've been doing this. You've been walking. Then you find a bed. This is, yes, the monastery of Samos actually has its albergue in what you might think is the monastery crypt, but actually the crypt is just sort of beyond that wall. And it's a glorious place to stay. Important that you then shower, do whatever it is you do at the end of the day, write in a journal, hang out with your new friends.
Family, your
Yes.
family, And that's again where we were talking about family and the transfer and the need for family. And family is part of our theme here, but family lifting you up, family being there for you. You meet people along the way who become your family, who then after your Camino are still your family, giving you on the Camino both physical and spiritual support. And there are many times I was in pain for quite a lot of our 500-mile, and each person would take turns walking with me, giving me spiritual comfort as we were walking. So in that sense, it's very much a spiritual journey, and very much similar to a lot of what we're talking about with the fellowship, giving each other support.
Speaking of fellowships, here are some of ours over the years. And each of the people that we met, each of the people that we met on these journeys are there for different reasons. Some of them begin as genuine pilgrims, but many of them that are there because they're between jobs, or they just had a horrible breakup, or this is a really cheap way to see Spain, or they're hikers, or they're tourists. But by the end of the Camino, it has transformed them all into pilgrims. I saw this time after time after time. The lady on the bottom there, second from right, Allie, is the nutritionist I was talking about, and she is a hardcore atheist. But on our third day walking, we stopped in a small abandoned church in the middle of a field. Like, the place was practically a ruin, and we just sat there for probably 20 or 30 minutes. And as we were leaving, she said, the world would be a much better place if more people spent an hour quietly in a church. And Rebecca, up there in the light, she still sends us cookies for Christmas. So back to the end of the day. What did you do now that your walk is done? Well, maybe a walk around the village, see the sights, grab a drink with your friends and fellow pilgrims who have become your family.
Comes in pints,
It comes in pints.
or a half a liter.
Yeah, fair. Perhaps an evening mass or vespers at the local parish church. This is the local parish church in the town of Navarrete. If you were ever wondering where the ink and gold went to, here it is. Spanish churches, by the way, are absolutely amazing, because all of this decoration is at and around the sanctuary, at the altar. The walls of the rest of the building are just bare, undecorated stone. So you get just walking in, you get this amazing focus, right? Not universally true, but.
And you're standing outside, looking at this sort of stone building, thinking, do I really want to go in? And then you go in and you're like, oh, wow. And you just spend time there. And it's a beautiful, beautiful experience.
So there will be an enormous dinner, of course.
And oftentimes,
Perhaps like this one.
oftentimes when you are in the donativos, you are expected to participate in the cooking and cleaning together of the dinner, because that is all part of the donativo experience, the donation only albergue. And it's another way in which you create and form these spiritual families.
So at this point, you might be thinking, oh, this is a walk in the park. This is fantastic. Well, my friend, there are obstacles. There are physical obstacles. That 12% grade is no joke. And it's, I think, 16% on the other side of that hill. And there are mental obstacles.
A very, very, very bad day. Very, very no good, very bad day.
Yes, that was, yeah, we got to the top of the steps at Saria, which is where we had planned to have lunch. Francine sat down, keep doing that, and said, yeah, I'm done. Yep. So, and of course, speaking of obstacles, hobbits and pilgrims, even modern ones, with the best possible gear, still share one common foe, implacable, relentless, the weather. When we were in Spain in 2016, they were having 100-year floods in an area we'll talk about a little later called the Meseta. So this is a very dry area. There are channels, concrete channels that they built to help irrigate the crops. When we were there in 2016, those were about 4 feet underwater. So, but despite all the obstacles, there are also great spiritual consolations. Can't really see that too well, but that is the church that we sat in quietly. In fact, the entire Camino has a rhythm to it, almost like a guided retreat. So we're going to, again, talk specifically about the Camino Frances. The first part, through the hill forests and vineyards of the ancient kingdom of Navarra, which includes the modern-day regions of Navarra and La Rioja, which has the best wine in the world, another hill I will die on. And it's said by pilgrims that this first part of the Camino is designed to break your body.
And
Okay?
it also creates your family.
Yes. Yes. It is constant up and down. You're walking out of the Pyrenees mountains, which are no joke, and it's just this constant undulating landscape. It's beautiful, but your body is definitely being broken in. No matter how much training you think you've done, no. Your training is your first week walking down the Pyrenees. Think of this as the first part of the Hobbit's journey, from Hobbiton through the Shire, through Greenland, and finally to Rivendell, right? It's this undulating territory. In our case, we don't arrive in Rivendell. Wow, that's dark. We arrive in Pamplona, which is an amazing place. And I wish that picture were better. But the cathedral in Pamplona is just an amazing place of spiritual renewal. There is, you probably can't see it, there's a tomb right in front of the altar. And I was struck by these figures carved alongside. No, they are not. They are meant to be mourners for the folks who were buried there. But that sort of artwork you see in the big cathedral churches throughout northern Spain. But it's not just the cities and the big churches. All the little villages have wonders of art. But always, it's this up and down woodland terrain. And then we get to the second part of the Camino. This is the Meseta. The Meseta is a lot like, I want you to think of Nebraska. It's flat. Lots of people think it's dull.
That same one tree.
Yes.
I just keep walking.
It's not completely flat. I mean, you'll be walking along in the flat, and then all of a sudden you get these crazy big ridges that like wrinkles in the ground that you have to go up and down. Can't go around. They run for hundreds of kilometers. But mostly, it's mile after mile, day after day of this. It's a big space, and there are so few pilgrims walking this part of it that even small distances or small differences in the speed that you walk add up very, very quickly. There will be times where you will suddenly realize that the entire world consists of a horizon of blue and green and one road from horizon to horizon with sometimes one tree, right? And not another human being in sight. It is.
This is a part of the Camino that really kind of breaks your brain.
Yeah, because you spend a lot of time walking alone, just you and the Lord lost in your thoughts. And a lot of people can't handle that. There are many, many people who walk the Camino who skip this whole section. Like they'll do the beginning and they'll take a train and then they'll do the end. The fellowship, of course, spends many weeks walking through the long, flattish wastes of Eriador and then into the mines of Moria. No mines on the Camino of which I'm aware. They endure incredible hardship and spoilers, this guy does not come out of it well. But the fellowship finds a place of refreshment, rest, and hope in the beautiful forest kingdom of Lothlorien. We pilgrims likewise find a place of refreshment, rest, and hope in the middle of the Meseta, in the glorious cathedral city of Burgos. And I'm just going to show you a few images because it's hard to explain Burgos unless you've been there. This cathedral was built over the course of about 600 years, and it has every architectural style from Visigothic through Romanesque to Gothic to whatever this amazing thing is. This is just a ceiling in a side chapel.
I just kept walking around like this.
Yeah. And there's another view. I took something like 300 photos in the cathedral. We spent a day there. It's glorious. And then it's back to this for another week or two. But finally, we come to the third part of the Camino. This is through the beautiful and rugged portions of Western Leon, including the beautiful mountain valley of El Bierzo. All right, they've got good wine too. And into the old, rugged Catholic kingdom of Galicia. And now that the Camino has broken your body and your brain, it builds it up a little bit. It builds up your spirit. To start with, there is the beautiful city of Lyon with its unbelievable cathedral. It is the only Gothic cathedral in the world that still has all of its original medieval windows. And it's amazing. Like, depending on what time of day it is, the windows have different colors. And depending on the season of the year, it'll be like in the fall, the place is largely in browns and golds. And in the spring, it's mostly in blues and reds. I don't know how they work this out, but it's amazing. And then you cross that last range of hills through the monastic village of Radanal and down the other side into Galicia. And here is where I want to talk about this place. This is Cruz de Ferro, the Iron Cross. It may not look like much, but it is a place of supreme importance to pilgrims walking the Camino Frances. It's easy to explain, but the experience is something very different. You'll notice that surrounding that cross is a giant pile of rubble. Well, that pile of rubble is actually cleared away with bulldozers every couple of years. Because what happens is pilgrims bring a stone from their homeland, or perhaps a stone that they picked up on the way, and they lay it down here. And that stone represents something that you need to let go of. Right? For some, it's a persistent sin that they can't quite get past. For some, it's a failed relationship. For some, it's somebody living rent-free in your head that you just need to put down. For some, it's a memory or a worry or a grief. Why here? Well, at this point, you've been carrying your pack for 3 weeks, maybe. And you know that every ounce, every gram that you carry is something you've got to carry and pick up every morning. So any weight that you can shed is a blessing. And this little stone that you've been carrying, right? I mean, that's just dead weight. And you get there and it becomes profoundly, I'm struggling for words. It's a profound thing to put that weight down. And I have a note here to myself. G.K. Chesterton was once asked why angels could fly. And he said, because they take themselves so lightly. And that's sort of the feeling behind this, that you are putting this thing down and you are laying it where? You are laying it at the foot of the cross, right? Saint Benedict has a wonderful thing in his rule where he advises monks to take their anxieties and their sins and to dash them at the foot of the cross. Not place them, but like
Throw them down.
throw them down, hurl them.
like one would hurl a ring into fire.
Yeah, funny you should say that. This is, of course, an exact analog to another burden, another source of sin that had to be left behind. There's no volcano at Cruz de Ferro, right? It's a pile of rocks. And a cross that marks, was originally there just to mark the highest elevation point on the Camino. Yes.
And even before they make it to the fire, they leave all their gear behind.
That's right.
At least even his weapon behind because he can't take it anymore.
Exactly. And there's a funny analog there too, because very early on in the Camino, people will start ruthlessly going through their pack and eliminating things because they just don't want to carry it anymore. I mean, you could really equip yourself. I mean, you could show up to Spain wearing shoes that fit and an empty backpack, and you could get all the gear you needed in the left behind boxes of the albergues. I mean,
I got those great green pants that fit me perfectly because the Camino provides.
yes. Deus providit, God provides. So the deeper meaning is there though too, right? Frodo in the end couldn't actually put the ring down. And sometimes we get to that point and it might be easy to put down the physical rock, right? But that's just sort of a sacramental echo of the thing that you're actually laying down. Sometimes you don't want to put that rock down. Sometimes you want to live with, for whatever reason, with that thing that's burdening you. You cling fiercely to that worry or that fear or that sin. But your fellowship has come with you, or at least Sam. She's the hero of the story. They can't help you. You can barely help yourself. This is a moment of pure grace to put that down.
You see, a lot of times you'll see people holding each other or just on their knees at the Cruz de Ferro. People helping each other at that cross because of the deepest meaning of what you're doing at that moment before you walk into Santiago.
So at this point, the hobbits go home. They've got an eagle, we've got an airplane, but our quest is not quite done. And the hobbits even spend some healing time in Gondor. And I'd like to propose the Kingdom of Galicia as an echo of Gondor, or maybe the other way around. Because this is a place where you will find old castles built by the Knights Templar, the great royal monastery at Samos, which is one of the most amazing places in the world to visit. Villages where people are not shy about proclaiming their faith on their front doors. And a place where the Eucharist is depicted on Galicia's coat of arms. It's a little disturbing, to see it on the trash bins that, right, that the government owns.
It's like spray painted on with a stencil.
Yeah, but it's everywhere you look, right? The Eucharist is ever present. It's not only on Galicia's coat of arms, it's on the coat of arms of almost every town in Galicia. And of course, the endless primeval forests. Galicia, very much like this area, is a temperate rainforest. So we've done our practice walks at home and we get to Galicia and it's like, oh, we're coming home, which is glorious. So the hobbits return to the Shire, but we arrive in Santiago de Compostela, which is actually standing in for the true object of our pilgrimage, right? Because what is earthly pilgrimage? This walking journey, but a metaphor, almost a sacramental for our pilgrimage on earth, from birth to our death. And like when we walk into Santiago at the end of the Camino, we hope that we will be greeted by other pilgrims, which was our experience.
Yes.
When we walk, we're a little slow, so a lot of the folks that we had walked with got there before us.
I walk on baby goat feet, so there's always that, I'm always a little bit behind everybody else. And we compare walking into Santiago a lot of times as when you're walking into
Your heavenly homeland, basically. You're walking into heaven. All these people that you've seen and met and walked with and broke bread with are saying, you're almost there. Come on in. Welcome. It's an experience like no other. I will say we often arrive still slightly broken. This is me having collapsed on the plaza. And then we come into the cathedral itself. Again, that massive gold, and you can see the pillars and the walls, otherwise they're just plain stone. And our ultimate object, which is of course, the tomb of St. James. So, to sum up, the Camino and the journey of the hobbits have some shall we call them superficial parallels? There we go. Particularly in the mode of travel, but they are very different journeys. We're not facing orcs or Nazgul, but we are facing those monsters that live in our heads, right? Especially on the Meseta. And of course, we have our moments of pain and our moments of fear and doubt. There's no war going on around us, but there very well may be one within us. But let us recall our definition of pilgrimage. There we go. Pilgrimage is sacred travel, and we expect to be transformed or changed or converted from the person we were when we began our journey. And certainly, the hobbits were indeed transformed, as does everyone who embarks on a journey of this scale. It's not for nothing that this promo shot from the Lord of the Rings movie is an exact analog for this pilgrim monument near Pamplona.
Monte de Pedron. Monte de Pedron.
Yes,
Monte de Pedron.
the hill of forgiveness.
Pedron, I keep saying it wrong.
Yeah, it's fine. She mixes up her Spanish and Italian. So to kind of lean into this trope, it's not necessarily the destination, not necessarily the journey. Maybe it's the fellowship we met along the way. No, it is all of those things, right? The people who have touched us and that we have touched and have helped this entire process to transform us as we come home. And that's all we got. Thank you very much. Oh, and for a particularly hobbit photo, this is one of my favorite photos from the Camino. So, do we have any questions, thoughts, random complaints?
We make our point.
So change can be really scary,
Oh, yes,
but the whole point of a pilgrimage is transformation.
that's correct.
Deeply personal question, just because it's not interesting otherwise, but how did you guys face we are gonna change? Like, that's a scary mountain to climb.
We, our last Camino, which was last year, we went with a question because we had some serious thinking to do about some important personal situation that was going on. We chose to walk that and discuss that change together. Other Caminos were very personal, but we were there to support each other without those changes. We've changed physically and spiritually through the 4 Caminos that we've done. Hope that answered.
This is really mundane, but how heavy was your pack?
So that is an excellent question. I carried more than most pilgrims because I insist on a guidebook because I'm that guy. But also I was carrying a breviary, which is not light. Breviary is the liturgy of the hours. It is Christian prayer based on the Psalms. I particularly pray a monastic form of that, which all 150 Psalms in a week, and the assorted prayers and things that go with that. So not a small book.
Yours was about 17 pounds.
On the first Camino, it was about 17 pounds. On the most recent one, it was closer to 13.
Yeah, and I can only say in maybe like kilos, because I think in metric when I'm doing these things, and it was about eight kilos, I think, for me, because I'm tiny. But you're also not carrying, you're not carrying your food. You're not,
Usually.
usually. Right, well, there's snacks, all right, there's always snacks. But you're also not carrying any kind of shelter. But you are carrying everything that you're going to need in order to protect you from the environment, because you hit hail, wind, rain, snow, everything, sometimes in the same day. So yeah, so you're carrying all of those things, but I tried to keep it very minimal. We looked specifically for very lightweight things to carry, especially like after walking with the shoes to walk around town, because you're getting out of your hiking boots and you're changing into other things. So, you know.
Yeah, I would say clothes and toiletries are primarily what you're carrying. There are places, and we've walked, some other folks here have walked the Camino Primitivo, which is a different route, where there is a lot less villages available with food. So there are some days where you have to pack your lunch before you go, and your breakfast, and your second breakfast.
And extra water, lots and lots of water.
Lots of water. Water's heavy. But I think the takeaway is, what are we carrying? As little as possible. Yes, way back there.
I was curious to know if your journey last year, your pilgrimage, if COVID-19, how that changed your journey last year as opposed to pre-COVID.
Fair enough.
You want to take?
Sure. There were a lot. Well, first of all, it was a completely different Camino. We did the Primitivo, which was even more difficult.
But shorter.
Shorter, but the wearing of the masks in many of the places, specifically, it was day-to-day checking on what the mask regulations were. But in most places, if you were outdoors, you did not have to wear a mask, obviously. And because there were less people, because we were in the middle of COVID-19, it was easier to take your masks off when you were eating and that sort of thing. We didn't meet as many people because of it. We brought our family with us. Basically, I brought a friend with me. So we didn't meet a whole lot of people extra as we've done in previous Caminos.
Yeah, and definitely when you're in the cities, like it was 100% masked. So, but again, those regulations were changing while we were there. And it was like, we would show up in a town and be like, okay, what are the rules here?
Yeah, each region as well as day to day.
Yeah, good question, thanks. Anybody else? I think we're good. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Jane.